Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have an astonishing video just released by a British news channel showing a news report from the Darbar Sahib just a few months before the terrible 1984 atrocity, including an interview with Bhindranwale himself. We'll take a look at the video and the incredible insight it gives to how things were just before Gandhi launched her terrible offensive. And if we have time, a US Congresswoman has caused outrage after criticising Sikh prayers in the US House of Congress. The backlash has been something to behold. And meanwhile in LA, riots have erupted as ICE agents wade into an army of troublemakers. And Narendra Modi has been invited to the G7 meeting in Canada this month by Mark Carney. Why is Sikhs for Justice so happy about this? Well, to answer that very question is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. And yeah, it is big news happening, so stay tuned for the whole show. Make sure you stick around for the comments that you send us so awesomely every day. We love the comments, especially the ones that critique us in Critics Corner. So keep them all rolling. We love it. Thanks, everyone, for being a part of the show with us. Back to you, Angus.
Absolutely. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And indeed, stay tuned for the end of the show when we will take a look at loads of your great comments, including a brief foray into Critics Corner, which is great to see. Right, James, lots to get through as always this morning. What are you going to start us off with today?
LA is reminding me of the 1990s in some regards, Angus. It says a city on edge in a city that is seeing some rioting and some violence going on. For the most part, the people started out protesting against the ICE agents that came in on their sweeps to go through businesses unannounced and to round up more illegal immigrants. Now, the city and the regions have definitely stood up and said that ICE is not welcome, that they don't want them coming into their community as they are. This, again, is reminiscent of 1992 riots that happened down in Watts, except this is just down the road with issues taking place in several areas, including Compton. Sorry, I was going to say Watts, but that's where the riots were in 92. Several areas that are seeing a lot of agents that were deployed who met with fierce criticism and backlash, and they've actually had to call in 2,000, of the National Guard to help quiet things down. Sunday night, things did quiet down quite a bit. Going into Monday morning, it was a lot calmer than it had been all weekend. Now, as I said, we know that there are many issues that are at the forefront of the politics in the U.S. Here in Los Angeles, though, it has a population that is very much a melting pot of different nationalities. And with the Hispanics really being focused on in this round of raids, that seems to be the majority of the people who are standing up against what's going on. Now, if you look at the different programs or different things going on by ICE, of course there are concerns of many levels. Now, for me, watching it unfold over the weekend, I think that one of the biggest things that could have been done at the earlier stages is to have ICE back out and try to let the emotions cool. The emotions are high, and let's face it, when there are 1 million Hispanics and others out there supporting them, it's going to be a breeding ground for also the invitation to those who want to do stupid things. And I'm not saying just Hispanics, I'm saying people of all different nationalities that are going to use it as an opportunity to get exposure for their own causes, including one individual that I keep seeing just plastered all over on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so forth. Now, this individual's on a bike. He's waving a Palestine flag and really stirring things up from that regard. But again, it seems to be the same photo, or the same individual at least, in these photos that are really a stepping stone and giving a soapbox to those who are arguing against against the minorities. So again, it is not helping that regard because, as I said, you get those people that use it for their own purpose and they're opportunistic. So they have that chance now. Now, the National Guard, here is a tweet from Donald Trump reporting or replying to that. And he started to put down the governor, Mr. Newsom and Mayor Bass. And you can see that he is just going back to the childish name calling that just is so Donald Trump. But regardless as to that, I think that it really also needs to be looked at from a context that it is ICE agents that are involved. The National Guard is involved. And it is a federal jurisdiction when it comes to that regard. And here he is talking about the city and the state. Now, the city of Los Angeles and the state of California could bring the highway patrol, the state police, as well as the LAPD and LA Sheriff's Department in. However, they would be interfering with the work of the federal agents. So the hierarchy goes. And we know that, there's a big hierarchy and pissing contest between law enforcement at all levels. And this, of course, just complicates the matter as well. So I don't know that it's fair to be really going after the governor or the mayor. I think that you have to deal with it from the perspective is that it is a federal issue that needs to be looked at. But there's opportunity here to back up, to go back and really communicate with community leaders and say, okay, this is the problem. How are we going to tackle this? How are we going to deal with this and find a way to do it as emotions calm and come right down with the temperature? Even Governor Newsom was vocal critic, stating that the deployment of the National Guard would only inflame the situation. And it appears that the National Guard, when they were sent out, they didn't have a real action plan, which really complicated things and made it even more chaotic. Now, in the midst of all of that turmoil, voices from the Sikh community, which is previously faced similar challenges with the federal immigration enforcement, they've resonated their concerns and they are standing with the Mexican community to back them up and to stand shoulder to shoulder. And that's not a surprise because we know that Sikhs look for injustice and they act when they see it. They want to try and help to bring along a better resolve than violence. And that's the big issue for everyone at the end of the day. Now, when we also take a look is that there are several organizations that are not only dealing with the legal ramifications and challenges throughout previous actions by ICE, but the Sikh community is also down in Los Angeles helping with Langar and other areas of giving support to the community. And one of the executive directors for the Coalition of Human Rights recently stated that at a rally, not at this particular event, but at a rally, that these are not criminals. These are our neighbors, our family members, and our friends. And I think that's at the end of the day what people have to realize is that when you look back at the 1990s and the riots that took place down in the Watts and down in Crenshaw and, at the intersection of Florence and Normandy, there was such tragedy. Now, this is something that LA has spent decades rebuilding from. I personally toured the aftermath of the riots down in Los Angeles at the time. And to see this going on really, really saddens my heart to see this. To see the suffering that some businesses may go into, but at least the majority of the properties are not being damaged, which really makes a big difference. But again, it is really just a really sad thing to see a city on edge, a city being just, facing such upheaval when they've spent decades not only trying to rebuild the physical structures, but also the trust level between the community, law enforcement, government agencies, and even within different communities themselves. And South Los Angeles has definitely improved. It is a lot different than it was back in the 90s when it was very much gang infested and an unsafe area. So again, it is a big story. We're going to be watching, and we'll just see how things play out there. But I'm really hoping that community leaders can step in and get their citizens and residents of the communities to back down and calm down, and at the same time, that ICE and the National Guard can kind of back up as well. Instead, everybody just seems to be coming head to head and clashing with emotion and such. And I don't think that either side wants that. I think everybody's, at the end of the day, looking for a peaceful resolution, Angus.
Yeah, to me, it's very clear exactly what's going on here. And it's reflected over here in the UK, exactly the same issue. And I dare say probably in many other areas of the Western world. A lot of this is down to agent provocateur is the term used. Now, clearly, we have, let's say, the two very polarized sides in this situation. We have Donald Trump, we have ICE, MAGA, all this whole sort of movement of, he was elected basically saying, I will close the doors, I will stop immigration, this mass immigration into the United States. And he was elected on that ticket because people were just tired of these open borders and people just pouring in just uncontrollably. So he's doing something about it. And this is what these ICE raids are about. They're identifying those who did take advantage of the situation and poured into the United States illegally or legally and then have outstayed their welcome or outstayed their visas, etc. So this is part of his policy to do basically exactly what he was elected from. Now, unsurprisingly, on the other side of the coin, you have the immigrant population who are saying, well, no, particularly those who are here legally. Well, then in theory, they have nothing to fear. But then you have a lot of this, the other side, let's call it, who are actually there illegally, and they really don't want to leave. So you've got these two sides, I would say, quite vociferous in their opinions. Very clearly, Donald Trump is this massive ego. And yes, there are two ways of tackling this problem. He can either do it diplomatically, where both sides just talk to each other and say, look, let's just calm the situation down, let's reach a compromise, let's find a solution, a peaceful solution to this. Or we can do it the other way, which is basically what's happened, which is Donald Trump saying, look, no, the law is the law. It is black and white. There is no in between. You follow the law or else. And he said, right, or else we send in the National Guard, we'll send in the Marines, we'll send not just the ICE agents, but we will use a complete brute force because you will toe the line, you will follow the law. And that's exactly what is done. Now, in response to that, this is where it starts getting a little bit naughty, let's say, because this is when I say it's reflected here in the UK, for example. The left wing, and by that I mean the far left extremists, love these situations. These are exactly the situations where they send in their agents provocateurs. These are individuals or small groups of people who are basically, they are anarchists. And ironically, they are fascists. No, they're not extreme right wing, they're extreme left wing fascists. They are looking to undermine society. They are looking to undermine the rule of law, the law and order, basically. And they love these situations because all the ingredients are there to foment rebellion, to foment problems, to cause chaos, to bring down governments. This is what they're there for. And they send in their agents. And you will notice, as indeed you did, James, there are people there whose faces become a little bit familiar. And again, we saw this in the BLM riots, the George Floyd riots that spread across the Western world, exactly the same situation where these agents have realized there is a really toxic, really volatile situation that they can take advantage of. They send in these individuals and they stir up trouble. We saw, for example, in these riots, we've seen Mexican flags, we've seen Palestinian flags. Now, why are Palestinian and Mexican flags being flown amongst these riots in Los Angeles? Well, we know full well it's because it is these left-wing extremists that are stirring up trouble. They actually don't care about the argument. They just see a volatile situation which they can take advantage of, and they stir up the anger. They really provoke those, and primarily these left-wingers. They are left-wing. A lot of these immigrants by nature are left-wing. There's nothing wrong with being left-wing. But it's these left-wing extremists that then take advantage of these people who might have a perfectly valid argument against what's going on in America that would normally be resolved diplomatically through normal discussions and even just basic, simple, quiet protest, democratic process, which is, again, a perfectly legitimate thing to do. But it's the left-wing extremists who waded in here, stirred up trouble and said, no, you don't need to protest democratically. Let's get out there. Let's cause riots. Let's set fire to cars. There are Tesla cars, £150,000 electric cars, also $150,000 electric cars that are deliberately being torched, etc. etc. In other words, there's violence, there are stores being looted. Yes, we've been here before. It is the left-wing extremists who are causing this. It's a small group of extremists who are going around situations like this, and again, I use BLM as an example. They wade into these situations and they deliberately stir up trouble. They turn them violent. They create them into these dangerous, really volatile situations where riots happen, people get hurt or worse, and in turn, it provokes the government to send in the troops. So you see this escalation of violence. This is what they want. This is exactly their goal. They are after chaos, insurrection. This is how they work, and this is exactly what's happening in LA. Again, a generally left-wing protest about a legitimate problem about immigration, and it's legitimate on both sides. Both sides' arguments are legitimate, but normally it would be resolved peacefully and democratically. But the left-wing extremists have seen the situation and said, right, here's a great polarized example that we can escalate into something a lot more exciting, and it serves this left-wing extremist agenda of violence, of chaos, of insurrection. That's what it's all about, James, and here we go again.
Yeah, absolutely, Angus. And I mean, we also can look at the other side of it when it comes to pulling back the ICE agents and the National Guard. Once again, they would have to have a solid plan in place for the LAPD and LA County Sheriff's Department to ensure that it doesn't just open the floodgates like what happened in 1992. Now, in 1992, the LAPD pulled out and they completely abandoned the communities that were literally set ablaze. So again, there's it's got to be a calculated plan. It can't just be chaos, and that's what we're seeing right now. And when you bring up about the legal way or the legality of kicking everybody out of the country that doesn't belong there, there's also the due process that's being ignored. There are a lot of laws. So when people actually voted for Trump and voted for the enforcement and responsible immigration and then the enforcement to remove illegals, again, they anticipated it happening through the legal process with due process and not by masked men just coming and storming in the middle of the school or the middle of the workplace without warrants, without reason, and then taking people away who are actually citizens. And that has happened so often already. It's happening on a daily basis where people are getting mixed up in it that do not belong. And even one of them that was deported, that was a citizen of the U.S. who had to be returned as well. And I'm not speaking of Abrego Garcia. I'm talking about another individual. But regardless, it is a big issue that, people are really angry about the due process part and how it's being executed. And I think that's the biggest part. And as you touched on the different flags, the Mexican flags I would anticipate seeing there because it is very much a Mexican and Spanish community. But at the same time, like you said, Angus, is that people are using those symbols to stir up the emotion of people and to really try to extend it to a violent response, which overall it's calmed down quite a bit today, and it's not nearly as bad as it was over the weekend. But we'll keep a close eye on it, Angus, and come back to it if such be over the week and see how things are going. But with that said, of course, we've got to move on to the next story. And that is, again, talking about potential protests, Angus. Yes, Mark Carney has extended an olive branch out to Narendra Modi to see about resetting Canada-India relations. And in doing so, he sent Narendra Modi an invitation to join the G7 summit and at Kananaskis in Alberta. Beautiful on the edge of the Rocky Mountains. Beautiful location. But I also think that it's not only happened here before in terms of the G7 summit and other international leader meetings, but I think that a big reason for that is because it is an isolated, out-of-the-way community. There is control over highways coming in and out of Kananaskis, and it is, as I said, in the edge of the Rocky Mountains, which makes just a most picturesque location. While again, as I said, that location also helps with the security logistics. Of course, some of that means increased helicopter presence over the region, because they will be coming in and out. I don't think they're going to be making a long drive from the Calgary airport, and there is no airport in Banff, which would be the closest community for Kananaskis. So again, they'll probably fly in and out of Calgary, and then take helicopters to shuttle back and forth. Now, why is this important? Well, of course, we know about the potential involvement of the India government in a lot of transnational repression, with certain deaths that have happened in Canada, or assassinations, let's call them what they are. And when you counter into that as well, the foreign interference when it comes to our political structure and our politicians. Of course, this is a big issue. Will these be addressed between Modi and Mark Carney? I don't know. It is a big opportunity for trade. They have a lot on the agenda with the other countries that are going to be in attendance. And of course, that is going to be first and foremost. But we also need to understand, or that Carney needs to understand, and I'm sure that he does, being with the Liberal Party, who's been so supportive of the Sikh community over the years. I think that he understands the significant value of having that face-to-face with Modi, and also trying to deal with the concerns that we have as Canadians about the foreign interference, about the assassinations, about, just all of these issues that are of utmost importance. And then you also mix into that pot the human rights abuses that are going on in India, and whether or not Mark Carney expresses any interest in discussing that. But I personally feel that it is an opportunity to try and get things back onto more of a cooperative level between the two nations. If we are going to have any type of resolution in terms of the cooperative investigations to ensure that anybody in India that is involved in these assassinations in Canada should be held accountable. And I think that this is the next way for the government of Canada, with Mark Carney, say, okay, hold on. We've got a new leader. We want to take a new path. We want to reset relations. But he's got this opportunity to also have in there the caveat of, but we must deal with these issues as well. And that, I think, is something that can't be overlooked. Now, of course, we know that Donald Trump will be attending the G7, as well as leaders from France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the UK, of course. And that, again, the priorities, just to recap, are, of course, the peace and security in the region that we've discussed, but also issues in the Middle East, issues in Ukraine. And then they'll talk about the global economic stability, which, again, we'll see how that turns out. And then they're talking about building energy security. So a lot of different things on the table. And it's only a couple of days summit. So again, it's going to be very much pressing for time. Now, the potential for a diplomatic rapprochement is not without challenges. The invitation to Prime Minister Modi has been met with condemnation within the Sikh community. Of course, Sikhs for Justice calling for protests and people to get out there and have their voices heard. And of course, we know that Mr. Panoun has been online really promoting that and thanking the government of Canada. And why would he thank them? Well, simply because he is inviting Modi to Canada. Modi is accepted, and that gives the Sikh community a chance to protest and really be in Modi's face physically while being protected on Canadian soil. I mean, if you went to Delhi and tried to protest Modi there, I'm sure it would not go so well for anybody involved. Now, with that said, of course, the World Sikh Organization has also voiced strong opposition to the invitation, calling it a betrayal of Canadian sovereignty and the principles of justice. But I think that there is a balancing act if, and I really emphasize, if he brings up these other issues with Modi as they meet face to face. I'm hoping that there can be some kind of a diplomatic resolve there, Angus.
I think this really, I think, just endorses exactly what I was thinking and feared, I have to say, about Mark Carney. As regular viewers know, I'm no fan of Mark Carney, and I was always very suspicious about him being parachuted in as the new Liberal leader and in turn the Prime Minister, because clearly he comes from a very different stable to Trudeau. This guy is an alumni of the World Economic Forum. He is a globalist. He brings with him a completely different agenda, and it always surprised me that he was parachuted in as a liberal rather than a conservative, because I sense that his genuine personal politics probably sit to the right of centre rather than sort of more central as a liberal. And he is basically a globalist, and I think what's happening here is an absolute blatant piece of evidence that confirms my fears that he's a globalist first and a representative of his electorate second. In other words, his real main goal here, his main agenda, is the globalist agenda, that of the World Economic Forum. This is an unelected group of people who really have a new world order plan for the globe to, well, depending on your interpretation of choice, but ultimately it includes things like the world population, because of the food supply issue, may end up all eating insects, yes, farmed insects, and we all must live in 15-minute cities where we're not allowed to travel more than 15 minutes from our own homes. And this great quote from one of their videos is that you will own nothing and be happy. In other words, you will own no assets. You'll basically be renting it. Well, who owns those assets? The world elite, in other words. So again, follow your conspiracy theory of choice. But Mark Carney is one of many individuals who are pushing this globalist agenda that benefits a very small number of people on this planet, and the rest of us have to sort of go along and suffer. And again, that's a very grand sort of overview of the whole situation, but ultimately you boil it down to this simple situation, is that Mark Carney doesn't care about human rights. If he did, he wouldn't have invited Narendra Modi to Canada, or if he did, the first thing on his agenda would be, right, Mr. Modi, why are you persecuting minorities? Instead, we know full well why he's been invited. He's been invited to the G7 because India is a future superpower and they want to tie up global trade and commerce and relationships with India for the benefit of trade and commerce. Nothing to do with human rights. If human rights are mentioned in any meeting of the G7 over the next few days, James, I will be absolutely astonished. Ultimately, I think this is, as I say, it is just a complete and utter unambiguous sign that Carney represents the globalists and not his Sikh electorate, very sadly. Now, for the other side of the coin there is an advantage to this, which of course the Sikhs for Justice have picked up on. You get Modi into Canada, and what a prime opportunity to get out there and protest, get the Khalistan flags out, get the grassroots population out there in the streets, line Modi's route with Sikhs and Khalistan flags. Firstly, to remind him, we're here, we're not a fringe organisation, we're not going to go away, and we're going to keep on going until we win our independence. And secondly, it highlights to the world media, because of course every camera or every news outlet in the world is going to be there filming the events of the G7 meeting, and all those cameras are going to see the Sikh population out there with their Khalistan flag. So my message to you, all you guys out in Canada, get out there, be seen, be heard. Again, yes, this is an opportunity for grassroots to highlight to the world what Modi is up to, what India is up to, what Khalistan is about, why we should all be aligning behind the whole concept of Khalistan. So yeah, I think Sikhs for Justice are on this, saying, okay, well, let's take advantage of the situation. And I don't think, sadly, they'll go as far as to doing a citizen's arrest of Narendra Modi, much as I think they would love to do it. But certainly get out there, be seen, be heard. Go join those protests if you are there, or if you're anywhere near, if you can get there, get out there and get seen. And again, it's all about alerting the world to what Modi is really all about, and more importantly, is what the Sikh community are all about, and why people in the wider world should support the whole concept of Khalistan. James.
Absolutely, and I think that it's going to be a challenge in many regards. As I said, location is going to be one challenge for the protesters. And then, of course, accommodations for those traveling in from out of town. I suggest that you look at booking right away because Kananaskis is close to Banff, close to Calgary, but there's also the the Banff World Media Festival going on. And that usually fills up all the accommodations in Banff. So again, you better look around at that. And but I'm really going to keep a close eye on this. I won't be down in Banff myself this time, but I will definitely be watching everything as it unfolds, keeping glued to the different networks, and finding out what's going on in in Kananaskis, and as the meetings progress. I did send a request out to see if the PMO's office would respond to what the agenda is and what is planned to be discussed, whether or not human rights and transnational repression are on the agenda. Now, I don't expect, Angus, that they're going to really reply to that before Modi gets here, because at the same time, if Modi feels like he's being ambushed into discussions on these topics, he could, of course, just cancel the trip. And I think that it's important to get that face-to-face if we're going to move things forward at all, Angus.
Yes, as I said, I think there'll be lip service paid to the human rights issues, but in reality, I have my own suspicions about Khan's agenda for those discussions. Right, James, let's move.
I'm an optimist.
I will go along with you, James, and let us be proved wrong, or let me be proved wrong. I'll be delighted to be proved wrong. We shall see.
So.
Right, James, let's move on to my first story. And in fact, I think it's very likely I will drop my second story about a congresswoman who's really upset a lot of people, but I'll probably talk about that tomorrow. But firstly, I want to cover this video that was released at the back end of last week. Thank you indeed very much to certainly one of our correspondents through the email who alerted me to this video when it was released. You know who you are. Thank you for that. And of course, I think one or two people in the comments also found it and discovered it and highlighted it. I think TC amongst many others. So thank you to each of you who brought this to our attention. It is an absolutely mesmerising video. I'm going to play it now. And my original plan, I thought, well, I'll just show a little snippet of it and then maybe have a quick discussion. In reality, I'm going to have to show the whole thing because it is just astonishing. We talk about 1984. We talk about the events that happened in, just 41 years ago. Those terrible events of what happened. And we have to sort of imagine what it was like at the time. We have to imagine what Bhindranwale was like. You know, there are pictures, there's the very rare sort of video snippets of Bhindranwale, but of course there are all the stories about him. He's become this sort of almost legendary, almost mythical figure whose photo adorns every Gurdwara and so many walls. Again, this heroic figure who was Bhindranwale. And in this report, Bhindranwale himself is featured. And again, it almost brings goosebumps as you watch this, because this is an incredible snapshot that was produced by ITN. This is Independent Television News. This is a news channel here in the UK. They sent a reporter, Ken Rees, a very young Ken Rees, into Amritsar in March 1983. So this is just over a year before the assault on the Darbar Sahib. And this, so to put it in context, this is just a year before the events of 1984. Let me play this, and I'll stop it periodically through the video just to have a discussion, because in the end, I realised I have to play this whole video because, as I say, the word I use, it is mesmerising when you actually see this is the real thing just before those events of 1984. As I say, I'll stop. We'll have little discussions about it. Here we go.
Gandhi has reason to be worried. Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale is one of the acknowledged leaders of the new Sikh militancy. Surrounded by guards who are armed to the teeth and dressed in traditional warrior fashion, although they would like to arrest him, police dare not invade his rooftop sanctuary. They fear that scores on both sides would be killed as a result. Their patience with the temporal government 250 miles away in Delhi is fast running out. It's morning at the Golden Temple of Amritsar, 12 miles from the Pakistan border in India's Punjab state. To the country's 15 million Sikhs plus tens of thousands more scattered round the globe, this is the holy city, a Mecca, a Rome, a Jerusalem. Since the 16th century, the faithful have made the pilgrimage here to worship their God in a temple covered in real gold and filled inside with precious works of art and jewels. All day, a never-ending human stream pours across the marble causeway in this holiest of their holy places. Nowadays, though, as it has been in the Sikhs' long history, it's more than just a shrine. It's a political centre for a resurgence of Sikh nationalism, which potentially, at least, could cause Mrs. Gandhi's government even more trouble than the tragic events in Assam. The Sikhs, recognised throughout the world by their distinctive turbans and beards, are renowned as fighters. It took the colonising British 6 major battles to subdue them. Hundreds of thousands were killed in the bloodbath which followed independence. They're not people to compromise, and now they're involved in a long-running battle with the central government in New Delhi. Their leaders, based here in the Golden Temple, want greater autonomy for the state of Punjab. Extremists call for total independence, while the more moderate view favours a package of religious and economic concessions and a loosening of the ties with central government. When religious zeal and political ambition come together, it's a highly inflammable mixture, which in this case could pose a major threat to Indian unity.
Right, I'm just going to stop it there because there's a lot just packed in those first couple of minutes. But basically, this sets the scene. And you tend to forget, I mean, again, we're talking about the independence movement. And we do tend to, I suppose, almost refer to the khalistan movement as quite a relatively new phenomenon. And certainly the critics saying, it's never been there. You know, it's just a bunch of modern extremists trying to resurrect some silly concept. No, it absolutely wasn't. Don't forget, this is only a couple of decades, 2 or 3 decades after partition. And of course, this independence movement is really very much relevant. It is very much there. It is very much bubbling beneath the surface. In fact, not even bubbling beneath the surface. It is very much there around Amritsar, and there's regular reference. And this is the reporter has obviously talked to a lot of Sikhs in the area, and they said, no, we want our independence. We want our own autonomy. And he also referred to there about what he called the tragic events in Assam. Well, of course, it's referring there to the Mizoram independence movement over on the other side of India, on the east side, where, again, it was another independence movement which was brutally suppressed by the Indian government at the time in 1966. They sent in the troops and the Air Force, and they basically brute force bombed the independence movement into submission. A familiar story, isn't it? So again, since 1947, we've had all these independence movements, whether it was the Nizams of Hyderabad, the princely state that wanted independence, which again was effectively brute forced into alignment. No, you will not go independent. You will become part of India. We had Assam, the Mizoram situation, where again the army, the Air Force was sent in, where it was brutally suppressed and said, no, you will not go independent. You will become part of India. And here in 1983, we have the Sikhs once again, likewise, as they had been since 1947, saying, no, we want independence. We are an independent nation. Our golden temple here goes back to the 16th century. And notice in this report how it stresses the point that we have been here. This is our holiest site. We have been here for centuries, and we do not belong in India. We want our independence. So all the clues are there, saying that there is no ambiguity here, is that we want our independence. So of course, as the reporter said, trouble is brewing for Gandhi. So all the ingredients are there, the clues are there about what is coming just 12 months later. And again, it's just take note of just the whole context here is that the Sikh people are, it seems, united in, despite what he calls the extremists wanting independence, but the general Sikh population still want more autonomy. So there is no feeling of joining with India. There is no feeling of we are India, we are part of India. It is we are actually separate. We are not part of India. So that is the prevailing feeling. Now, amongst all this, Bhindranwale himself is holed up in the Golden Temple. As this report goes on, it highlights actually just again a little bit of the dynamics going on at the time. Bhindranwale and his followers realised that the Indian government under Gandhi didn't like what they were doing. They were seen as troublemakers, so they sought sanctuary in the Golden Temple complex. Now this of course caused a few internal problems because, again, this report highlights a little bit later, but there were members, particularly on the more religious side of the Sikh community, who say, look, no, we don't want you in the Golden Temple, particularly not in the Akal Takht, the holiest centre of the Darbar Sahib, because it could mean we become a target of the Indian state. We don't want trouble. We just want to live peacefully. But ultimately, Bhindranwale and his followers just said, look, this is what we have to do. We have to highlight our issues. We have to go independent. We cannot become subservient to this Indian state, the ruling Brahmins of India. That is not what we're about. So let me continue.
Mrs. Gandhi has reason to be worried. And yet, in the calm of the Golden Temple precincts, only the armed guards give any hint of violence. Sikhism has no class or caste structure, which makes it very unusual in India. All are treated as equals, even women, a Sikh proudly told me. Every day, volunteers of both sexes come to dip buckets in the holy lake and wash the marble floors. Then they enjoy a free meal, one of 5,000 given away here every day. The air of timeless tranquility doesn't extend beyond the heavily guarded gates.
Now, that's quite interesting because this is an Englishman who's come in, who's done his research and he's seen what the Sikh people are about. He's understood the concepts of langar. He's understood the basic philosophy of Sikhi, which is the complete rejection of the caste system, which certainly at this time of this report was very much prevalent in India. It still is today, but certainly in the early 80s, it is a lot more obvious than it is now. And this, again, highlights this fundamental difference between Sikhi and the rest of India. Sikhs, from the very first guru, the very establishment of the Sikh religion, was based upon this divergence of this rejection of the caste system. So again, this is why the Sikhs do not belong in caste-ridden India. This is why the Sikhs require independence. They are totally culturally independent and separated from India. So again, this is highlighting the goodness. Back in 1983, this British reporter recognised the goodness of what Sikhi represented and how it sat so uncomfortably with the rest of India.
But the tranquility of the temple sanctuary is deceptive. On every street corner in the town, you'll find contingents of police and soldiers. The central government are only too well aware of the tension that remains in the Punjab and which could threaten their stability in the future. Until recently, Amritsar was a prosperous town set in the middle of the rich farmland they call the Granary of India. Its hotels full of tourists and wealthy investors from Bombay and New Delhi. Now 16 companies of police patrol streets where in the last 9 months a wave of looting and arson has claimed 44 lives and left over 200 injured. They choose to ignore the lorry loads of armed Sikhs as they drive out from the sanctuary that lies behind the temple precincts. This man never leaves the safety of the temple. Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale is one of the acknowledged leaders of the new Sikh militancy. Surrounded by guards who are armed to the teeth and dressed in traditional warrior fashion, he strides to his daily prayers like an old-time chieftain. He's just 35 years old. Although they would like to arrest him, police dare not invade his rooftop sanctuary. They fear that scores on both sides would be killed as a result.
So there is the great man himself, Bhindranwale, aged 36. I mean, what have we all achieved by that age? Not a fraction of what Bhindranwale has achieved. What a heroic figure. But interesting parts there. Again, this reference to Amritsar and Punjab being the breadbasket of India. It is prosperous. This is the early 1980s where Punjab, since partition and of course before, was this hugely prosperous area. It was agricultural. It was thriving. There was wonderful commerce, hotels, shops. It was a commercial success. It was a prime example of the growing wealth and prosperity of certainly that part of India. Yet it was driven by the Sikh community. It was Sikhs once again who were creating this prosperity and the success. Now again, Suddenly there are references, and don't forget, this is before the events of 1984. This is, of course, we've got the benefit of hindsight. We can look back and think, God, look at this in the context of what happened just a year later, the dreadful Operation Bluestar. And this is, of course, these people here and the reporter had no idea what was round the corner. But he is sensing already these growing tensions. He talks about tensions. He talks about the threat to India's stability. In other words, he's realising, and certainly the Gandhi government and the Brahmin elite are realising, we've got a problem here. We've got a real problem here. We've suppressed it brutally in Assam. We suppressed it likewise in Nizam and Hyderabad and all these other areas that even dared talk about breaking away, that dared talk about threatening the overall stability of this colonially ruled India. And here we have the Punjab, the Sikh people, heavily armed, as he said, Bhindranwale seeking sanctuary in the Golden Temple because they, again, realise the sides being drawn here. Bhindranwale and his followers realise they are becoming targets of the Indian government. The Indian government recognising they've got a growing problem here. They are being faced with a choice. What are they going to do about this? Gandhi realises very clearly here, even in 1983, and we do know that Operation Bluestar, the plans went back years. Watch my podcast if you want to know more about that. The plans for Bluestar went back years. So Gandhi and the rulers of India realised that the Sikh community were a growing problem. They had to do something about it. Here, things are starting to polarise. They're starting to realise that the Golden Temple has become this focus, this focal point of Bhindranwale, this growing independence movement. They know they're going to have to do something about it. Now, that phrase there, they realise they've done nothing about it so far because they know if they invaded, scores would be killed. How prescient is that phrase? This reporter used that phrase that scores would be killed. That's why they're not invading or doing anything about Bhindranwale and his followers. How prescient is that? Anyway, let's continue.
He gave a rare interview to ITN, but was careful not to commit himself in public to a totally extremist line he may well take in private.
Sikhs desire complete independence, remaining in India.
But is the feeling here, apart from you people who obviously are very, very strongly feeling towards it, is the feeling amongst everyone, every Sikh?
कि ये विचार हर सिख दे विच हैगा वे
ਉਹ ਹਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਆਪੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਦਾ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ
each Sikh knows his own responsibility and he has been taught from the childhood to get these ideas.
Are these ideals worth fighting for if that has to be?
कि ये ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁੱਖ ਮੰਤਵ ਜਿੰਦਾਈ ਦੇ ਕਾਬਲ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਲੜਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ
ਕਿੰਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ
ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੰਗਾਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ
ਹਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਲੜਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ
these are worth and we must fight for them to get our rights.
Now, just on that, some of the commenters after this video said that the translator used there did not actually translate Bhindranwale's words as he spoke them. Now, James and I don't speak Punjabi. I would ask maybe our audience, those who do speak Punjabi, if there is anything there that is interesting, can you email us? Let us know. Message us at message@satlajtv.com if you have any thoughts on what Bhindranwale actually said there, and if the translator did actually mistranslate his words. I'd be very interested to know.
Even as he spoke and outside the temple walls, the daily queue of volunteers for arrest was gathering together. Later in the day, these women were, in the Indian phrase, trying to court arrest. It's a form of civil disobedience pioneered by Mahatma Gandhi. Their minor offences usually earn them a week or two in jail. A few of the 93,000 Sikhs similarly arrested in this town since July. Last year, the violence even reached the capital, New Delhi. Bloody clashes between the police and Sikhs were only halted by police gunfire, and 4 Sikhs were killed on the very steps of Parliament.
This is interesting because, again, this is sort of buried in time, and we tend to not, or many people don't even know this, is that yes, the Sikh people were very unhappy with what was going on, but in fact the unrest was way more than actually is realised, I think, by many people. And this is a deliberate tactic by the Indian state now, is to bury this news, is to bury the memory, the fact that actually the Sikh people were deeply unhappy since partition. And of course here, just by way of example, I didn't even know this, is that the Sikh women were out there causing civil disobedience. There were 93,000 women had been arrested for civil disobedience. 93,000 women had joined their menfolk in civil disobedience, just on minor offences, but just enough to make their political point, saying we are not happy, we are very deeply unhappy with the situation, we are not part of India, we want independence. And this is their almost democratic way, this is their almost cry for freedom, that even the Sikh women are doing. And likewise, it's spilled over into violence, even in the streets of Delhi. So again, it just highlights how unhappy, how deeply unhappy the Sikh people were, even in the 1980s, never mind what followed in the 80s and 90s, is that there really was civil unrest brewing to the point that it actually exploded into violence on the streets of Delhi. Now, let's go back to the politics of the situation.
On another temple rooftop sits another man surrounded by more armed guards. He's the moderate leader, Sant Harshan Lonwal. He wants religious concessions, and he'd like the Punjab state to become a Sikh state run by members of his Akali Dal political party. His dream would be Mrs. Gandhi's nightmare, as every special interest group in this nation of 700 million tried for its own separate deal. So no wonder that within the past week, Mrs. Gandhi sent her son and heir apparent Rajiv to attend a meeting of Sikhs loyal to the Congress party in Delhi. He proposed more talks and more government attention to their demands. Back in the Golden Temple, where men with guns pray daily for their dream of Sikh independence, her moves are regarded as purely cosmetic. The holy city and its temple have stood here for 400 years. The first law and government in these people's lives is here in their holy book. Their patience with the temporal government 250 miles away in Delhi is fast running out. Ken Rees for Channel 4 News in India.
I mean, what an absolutely stunning report, particularly in the context of what we know followed just 1 year later after these events. I think it's very interesting, very telling. Gandhi's nightmare is what he referred to. In other words, they realised at this time that Bhindranwale and his followers, but also the whole Sikh people, were pretty much united at this time, rejecting India. They did not want to be part of India. They wanted their independence. And certainly, at the very least, they wanted autonomy. And again, there's a clue here about the two divergent ways of tackling this. We have Bhindranwale being a little bit more, let's say, militant about it and saying, no, this is exactly what we want and we will fight you for it. And then we have the political side, that let's call it the more democratic side. We have the Akali Dal. Yes, this is the original Akali Dal that was set up by the community to be this democratic, to go along the traditional, more traditional democratic methodology that they realised they needed to do to have a voice, have an influence in Indian affairs. So the Akali Dal was set up to give the Sikh people a voice. And the Akali Dal is going about, again, fighting the same battle, but trying to do it a little bit more politically shrewdly. And there we have the Akali Dal saying, look, please, you've got to give us more autonomy. We want independence. You're supposedly a democracy. You've got to give us a democratic vote. You've got to allow us our independence. So again, you've got Bhindranwale on the more militant side, and you've got the Akali Dal saying the same thing, but in a more democratic way. And of course, as the reporter says, this was brewing trouble for Gandhi's government. Gandhi's government realised the very stability of India was at risk here. They realised what really was at stake here is that the Sikh people are powerful enough, are prosperous enough, and certainly are motivated enough to rise up and literally fight for their independence. And this is pushing Gandhi into a corner. This is pushing the Brahmins into a corner. They realize we must do something about this. We either have to let them have it, or we do what we did in Assam, or we do what we did everywhere else that any independence movement has risen up. We will crush it. We will crush it with absolute violence, with the full force of pure military violence. And that is obviously what they decided upon 12 months later, to send in the troops. And probably around this time is when they were consulting with the British government, Thatcher's government, saying, what would you recommend? Again, we don't know for sure what was advised. We believe the SAS said that you need to do a little bit more of a surgical strike and remove Bhindranwale. I actually don't think that would have been enough. Watching this video now, I think that would have had an even worse effect. I think that would have provoked the Sikh community into literally rising up violently. So again, and I think there are all the signs here are, again, it's easy in retrospect to know what happened, but all the signs here is it is pushing things to a head. Gandhi had to do something about this because clearly the situation is running out of control. And she answered with absolutely possibly the worst thing she could have ever have done, which is launch that dreadful, outrageous assault on the Darbar Sahib just a year later. But the words of warning there that are very much relevant in 1983 of this report as they are today in 2025. Sikhs' first law is the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. That is what they are answerable to first and foremost above anything else in this world, is the words of the Guru and the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. That is what they answer to first. India doesn't even feature. That is what guides their lives, and that will always guide their lives. So James, I would say emotionally watching that video, the first time I watched that video, how I felt was absolute anger. I felt just deep, fundamental anger that here was a whole people driven by their simple desire to rule their own lives, to run their own lives. And they came up against this colonial group of Brahmins, this ruling elite of India, who were handed the whole of India, this artificial construct, on a plate by the British Empire. And the Brahmin rulers of India, in the form at that time of Indira Gandhi, said, right, we're not putting up with this. We don't care what you want. We don't care what you think. We're going to send in the army and we're going to crush you. So when I see this video and I see Bhindranwale and his followers all seeking sanctuary in the Golden Temple, I almost wish I was there. I want to take up arms with them. I feel that motivated, saying, how dare you try and crush our lives living under some authoritarian regime that you think we're threatening your stability. All we want is our basic human rights. We've asked you over and over again for our basic human rights. All you are doing is you're denying them. And it doesn't matter what we do. We take to the streets. Our women are being arrested by their tens of thousands, and yet you do not listen to us. All you're doing is you're sending in the troops. Yes, even the troops were there in 1983, building up their forces. And a year later, Gandhi sends in over 1,000 troops, armed to the teeth. She sends in the tanks and she destroys the Darbar Sahib with brute force. To me, James, it makes me increasingly angry, and I have no doubt that anybody who watches this and send this video around the Sikh community, get everybody in the community to watch this, to remind yourselves of what happened in the 1980s. Remind yourselves, even if you didn't know about it, tell yourselves, inform yourselves what the feeling was in the 1980s that was then brutally crushed in 1984, and then throughout the 80s and 90s again was brutally crushed through murder, through extrajudicial killing. All these young men that you see in these videos were murdered by Gandhi and her successors, by Rajiv Gandhi and by the ruling elite of India. That is what was sent against the Sikh community in the 1980s and 1990s, and this is why the Khalistan movement deserves to exist now, and why Khalistan absolutely more than ever should be established, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's face it, they openly admit that they knew that there would be violence and death on both sides if they were to go after Bhindranwale and to enter the sacred and religious location. Now, you also have to keep in mind that, as you can see, all those officers there, they were obviously using the threat to increase the police presence there. But I think that they had a really long-term plan, that they knew what was coming up in 1984, and they had to find a subtle way to increase the presence of officers in the region. So over the weekend, of course, there have been rallies and memorials all across Canada, the US, and around the world to remember the martyrs and the shaheeds. So again, our thoughts go back to all of those who were lost in 1984. And again, we know that their memories will live on in history forever, as long as we keep remembering what happened and reminding others or educating others on the atrocities that took place in 1984, Angus.
Absolutely. I mean, just as I say, watching that video just made my blood boil. It was incredible, actually, to see this snapshot, this 7-minute snapshot of that time of 1983 and just leading up to 1984, to see the great Bhindranwale himself interviewed, to see him, that heroic figure who has now almost gone into sort of legend status for what he did just 12 months later after that video. It's incredible to see, but as I say, it just makes my blood boil looking at just how powerful the feelings were even at that time amongst the Sikh people about independence, about this drive for simple autonomy, about we just want to make our own decisions about our own lives. We do not want to be ruled by these people that we have no relation to culturally, we have no relation to them politically. They do not represent anything that we represent. This rejection of the caste system, that whole caste system that runs India, is nothing to do with Sikh people. So why on earth should they be a part of this? And they just simply said, we do not want to be a part of this. You people are nothing like us. We are totally independent, separate people, culturally on every level. That's what it was all about. So when they basically just said, look, you've got to let us be on our own, you've got to let us run our own lives, they were met with sheer brute force and violence. They were suppressed. They were absolutely brutally beaten into submission over what followed. And again, it just makes my absolute blood boil when I watch that video. So please, to our audience, watch this video. It's ITN News. It's on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find it. Do watch it. Get as many people in the community to watch it as well. If you really want to see a fascinating insight and understand what 1984 was really all about, watch this video. Get as many people as you can to watch this video. It is such a fascinating watch, and it really stirs the emotions, not least just to see the great Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale ji himself speaking. So, unfortunately, because we had to dedicate so much time, and I think justifiably so, to that incredible video and to discuss it likewise, we have completely run out of time. We have no time even for our comments section, so we'll do it tomorrow instead, so apologies for that. Unfortunately, we must wrap things up for another day. But thanks for watching. Do stay tuned and let us know your thoughts on that video. As I say, it was an incredible video. I have no doubt that our audience will have a lot of thoughts and comments on that one. But as the clock has beaten us, we must wrap things up for the day. Thanks so much for watching. Do keep your comments coming in. Let us know your thoughts on that. Let us know your thoughts on all the other stories that we covered today. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satlujtv.com if you want to bring something to our attention directly. But unfortunately there, we must leave it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. You have been watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You've been watching Perspectives. We will see you tomorrow.